what are the most important things to focus on when you start thinking plant substrates?
Hmm. So I think the key is to know what plant you're working with and what its needs are. So if I'm growing a cutting, if I want a stem cutting and I'm growing that plant, I have to protect that cutting from drying out, right, before it can generate roots. So I need to be able to minimize transpiration stress, help keep that plant healthy. So what I want out of my substrate is, depending on the way I'm going to protect that cutting, I want it to do the job that needs to be done to allow roots to form. So what do I mean by that? Well, if I'm going to use a mist system, supplying mist over top to wet down the leaves and allow evaporation to cool the plant, just like sweat can, cool us when we're hiking or running. If I'm providing that misting layer and the water is constantly hitting my substrate, I've got to watch out for a substrate that holds a ton of water, that soaks it up like a sponge. And if I do that, I'm going to have lots of water in the rooting zone and no oxygen for respiration. So the plant will not be able to form roots in this really wet environment. So I probably want a substrate that will be well draining, hold a lot of oxygen. I want perlite. I want pumice. I want things that are going to drain well. If I'm going to use an enclosure where I'm going to trap water in a system and I'm going to keep it internal, I can then use a substrate that holds considerable water because I'm not going to keep adding water. I'm going to trap it in an enclosure, and I'm then going to be less susceptible to overhydrating my substrate. If I have a fogging system where I suspend little droplets, I can also use a substrate that holds a bit more water. That's okay because I'm not supplying the sheer volume like a mist system would over top. There are also differences between the type of crop I'm growing. They may be more or less forgiving of the amount of water in the root zone. So I want to identify what's around this plant. What am I trying to do in that space? For seed germination, I want to ask myself, what type of crop am I growing? Is it one that thrives with high water amounts and relatively little oxygen required for root growth, or is it one that needs considerable root growth? And often this will connect with a native environment. If you're looking at, does it come from a dry place or well-drained soil or very wet soils? Other times you can find it in a grower's handbook, but you're trying to identify how it is that you want to grow your crop. How wet is that interface with the seed? And so once you're thinking about the needs of your plant, and really the irrigation systems you have, whether it's sub-irrigation or mist or fogging or your handheld irrigation, then you're trying to pair that together with the substrates you have available to you. And then always in there is the cost and availability issue to continue to think about.
So even the best quote unquote media to grow in could be ruined by poor watering
Yes.
habits or mechanisms.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. I get asked by many people, why are my houseplants dying? Anytime I'm at a dinner party or anywhere, people know I'm a plant scientist and they have questions. If there's not a lot of time, I will tell them the answer is water, and we can talk about it later. And it's generally overwater, underwater, salt accumulation, and light levels are sometimes an issue, but often it is humidity, even, in the grow space, in the house or wherever the plant's growing. And so you are so right. You could have the perfect substrate and then mess it up with the way water is delivered, nutrients are delivered, the temperature that you're growing at. There are so many things that can be a mismatch in the equation for growth and health in a plant.